Okay, has everybody had time to review the minutes? If so, I'll entertain a motion for approval or modifications.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that we accept the minutes as written. Any corrections, comments? Well, I noticed one, probably because it's my name. There are two Ds on there.
I'll
On
make sure
Fred,
to.
Commissioner members present. And then, I guess the third line up from the bottom of the first page, it says initially 3 million was requested, by 2 million was received. I think that word by should be but.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Ayes have it. Minutes are approved with the corrections. Okay, next, got petitions and communications. Any of those?
No, we don't have any.
Okay, nothing written.
Nothing written.
Okay, and audience participation, and anyone in the audience wish to say anything at this point? Okay, no one wishes to speak. Next, we have staff report. Okay, Kelly?
Okay. Basically, we had received an email and letter from HUD regarding monitoring of our home program, which occurred the 19th through the 22nd. You'll also see the major accomplishments and activities. One note for our community development associate, Rachel Beekler. She resigned to pursue more direct service work versus grant administration. So she left early May, but we do have one of the planning interns who recently graduated. He is stepping in and filling in for that position, so which is very helpful, extremely helpful. His name is Matt, and he may be coming to the next meeting because he'll probably be doing memos and such, so you'll be able to meet him. And let's see, we had our neighborhood cleanup on the 16th. That went well. And you can see other housing rehab things that we did. And then, of course, major about having HUD coming for our monitoring. And then big news is that Jenna has turned in her resignation. She received a job up in near home where her family is. So if you want to, because some heard, some didn't. If you want to share a little bit about what.
Yeah, I
you'll
can
be
just
doing?
briefly talk about it. So I'm going to be working for Kane County up north, and they manage a tri-county workforce development program. So I'll be their planning and policy specialist up there. So I'm really excited to be closer to family, kind of have something new and exciting. But yeah, I wanted to thank you all too, because I think the commission, you all have been really great and very supportive and understanding of all the weird technical ins and outs of our program. So I'm really appreciative to you all for your support, and I'll miss you all. So thank you so much for, the ways you've contributed to our program, and really been behind us the whole way. So it's been 6 years since I started here, so this is a long run. But I'm looking forward to starting something new.
Well, commission will miss you too.
Her last day is June 2nd, and we're looking at having something like after work on the 1st. So when I get that confirmed and everything, I'll send an email out to let you know, so you can come and wish her well. Okay. And then other activities showing regular meetings and such that we've attended. So that's pretty much our staff report.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions on the staff report? If not, we'll move on to old business. Is there any old business maybe related to the annual action plans and what the city council did or anything like that?
they approved it, and we submitted it
Mhm.
electronically. We had a lot of formatting and such that we had to do, but we got it in by the due date. So now we're just waiting to hear back from HUD after their review to see what information additionally we need to submit. And that could take at least 45 days, I think it is, for them to review. So we'll be getting a letter at some point.
Okay. Well, any other old business that's not listed here? If not, we'll move on to new business. Under new business, we have a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement, Habitat fiscal year 2014-15. Would you like to explain that?
Sure,
Clarify.
I'll let Jenna explain.
Okay.
Sure. And yep, we actually realized that we didn't include the subrecipient agreement, which is what the resolution is authorizing. So if Kelly handed you a printed out copy of the packet, you'll already have it. But if you don't have the agreement, this is the same format that we always use, but we realized that we omitted it when we mailed out the packets. So yeah, feel free to take one, even if you're not sure. I made plenty of copies. So as part of actually our HUD audit and them looking at all our commitments to make sure we're squared away for the coming fiscal year, they're sort of changing how our consortium is operating a little bit. And there's a few strange kind of technical issues with how our TBRA contracts are currently structured. We had done an $80,000 TBRA amendment not too long ago. And that was a subrecipient agreement with them to continue their no limits program. It augmented the funding that they had already had. And then HUD came in and told us that because they are a consortium member, they view that contract very differently, and they don't consider it a commitment until they have actual signed leases for those dollars, which was not great because they currently they've been structuring their program the last 5 or 6 years as a 2-year program, and those funds were meant to extend the current contracts for a second year, but that wouldn't happen until a little ways out as people's contracts were renewed. And so we still had about a $72,000 shortfall. The shortfall, whenever I refer to that, I'm just talking about the amount of funding that we have to commit as part of our program. It's like every 2 years, the clock kind of starts over. So we have about 2 years to sign contracts, plan for our money, make amendments, do all these things. But at that 2-year mark, that's kind of when HUD drops the hammer, and we really need to have every dollar committed in, whatever contracts that we've decided to move forward with. So we'd done this amendment thinking it would be a big part of our commitment, resolution, remediation, whatever you want to call it, and then HUD came and said, no, that's not good enough. And so Habitat had already actually approached us about applying for additional funds to subsidize some new construction builds, which was really great. And they had requested $150,000. We were originally planning on maybe funding half of what they had requested, and then HUD came with this bad news. And so Habitat's application actually really fit the bill very well. This is the kind of contract that we do well, HUD is confident in, and so we're comfortable moving forward, believing that this will satisfy what HUD is looking for as far as a commitment for that last portion of our dollars. So the $80,000 contract still stands. It's still out there. We don't want to revoke it, but it's not in that lovely electronic system that we dealt with the consolidated plan. It's the same system for all of our accounting features and commitments. It will not be reflected in HUD's reporting that it is a commitment until those leases come in. And they've only had one come in so far. So they'll be trickling in the next, 8 or 9 months or so would be my guess. All that being said, the 4 builds that Habitat has proposed, the addresses are listed on the first page of the memo, so they're all in that kind of north end area, which is where most of Habitat's activity is going on. That's all kind of working in conjunction with the Attorney General grant that they got. That was the target area within Urbana that they had decided to focus their funding towards, which is really great. And then I'll also say, as part of this commitment, this would this basically depleted what we'd planned to spend out of our fiscal year 14-15 down payment assistance funding. I'm not particularly concerned about that since I'm leaving. That obviously changes a few things. It'll take staff probably a while to figure out who's going to run that program, what is that going to look like going forward. So this is actually good. It gives staff a breather, to figure those details out in the coming months. And in the meantime, Habitat can do their thing and do what they do best, which is really delivering quality, affordable housing to low-income buyers in a way that's, it's expected. They're always performing above and beyond my expectations. I can hardly keep up with them. So we will have our fiscal year 15-16 down payment funding available. That's still an optional activity that we had listed in our annual action plan. So I really hope that program doesn't go away. And we still do have one grant left as part of our last funding round, where we got some Federal Home Loan Bank dollars to augment that particular program. So, but that's the one, that funding round is only available through BC Bank. So if you know any low-income buyers that are looking for a grant, it's at the lower income level, that's 60% and below. I probably talk about that every week or every month, but that's the only Urbana Dream grant that's available that's active right now. But yeah, so they've requested $150,000. We've reviewed everything as far as the underwriting and done market studies and assessments for where they plan to build, what are the other builds that are happening in the area, what do the sales prices look like, and staff is recommending $37,500 for each house. That's in keeping with what we generally grant Habitat for their builds. Usually we've been between $35,000 and $40,000 a unit. So I think the individual structuring of it might be a little different. HUD also came back with some comments about our Chodo operating. They're actually pushing participating jurisdictions like ourselves to actually move towards a developer fee and less of the Chodo operating. I think some jurisdictions, not us luckily, they were actually using Chodo operating and just calling it a developer fee, which is a no-no based on all the supporting documentation that needs to be behind that. If you call it Chodo operating, it has there's a definition for that, and all of the invoices and everything that you collect have to reflect those allowable expenses. But anyways, we're actually moving away from doing the Chodo operating. Our home grant has gone down and down and down every year, as you've seen if you've been here a while. And so it's getting harder and harder to really justify setting aside that additional 5% when it could be incorporated as a developer fee with, the regular Chodo operating, or Chodo development funds that we already have. And then one other thing I should mention, this is not a Chodo contract. That's the only difference. Everything's pretty much the same, except that this is a subrecipient activity. The city of Urbana is the one with the shortfall issue right now. Sometimes it's Champaign. In the past, it's also been the county, but right now it's or the city of Urbana that's a little bit behind on meeting their contract requirements. So this is an Urbana activity. That's why all the addresses in Urbana. Staff will be managing this project all internally, and then Habitat's basically the developer. So I think that covers most of it. If you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer.
I just have a quick question. It's underneath the table, it says that Habitat owns the Eads properties, but then the next sentence says that 903 Eads will be purchased, rehabilitated, and resold. So I'm assuming that just was something that needed to be updated?
Yeah,
Or-
probably. Which is the paragraph where it says they own it?
Yeah, first page.
The first sentence in the paragraph under the table says
Yeah, you're right.
Habitat owns the Eads
You're
properties.
right. That was probably a carryover. They do not own them right now.
Okay.
They will be purchasing them. So, yeah, I'm not sure what I was thinking when I wrote that out. But thank you for catching that. Yeah, they will
Okay.
be, acquisition is incorporated as part of this, as part of their
Okay.
development pro forma for
So
this
they
one.
need to acquire all of them. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is a little different. Normally, we would donate lots, but I think we kind of slowed down a little bit on our acquisitions. And sometimes because we're government, we can't get to things quite as quickly as, a not-for-profit can. So certain properties, like if they're owned by HUD and it was a foreclosure or something like that, they open them only to government bodies or not-for-profits. And so Habitat can kind of sneak in there a lot more quickly because they don't have to go through the council closed meeting, closed session process that we do. So it's actually better, if possible, for Habitat to buy a lot than it is for us. And it's less paperwork, because then they can buy it outright, and we don't have to go through all the transfer documents and everything else that goes along with that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. And I'm not even sure on that one paragraph we were just talking about. I think you're probably okay with it, because they do own the Eads property, right? They've already
I-
purchased that.
I don't
I
think
thought
they have.
had.
Well, I'll have
I
to
thought
check
they
with
closed the
Randy
deal
then.
on that. Okay, maybe they haven't. I thought that they were.
I knew they
supposed
were
to
in the
have completed that.
process, so maybe
Okay,
they have.
gotcha.
Maybe it's 1403 that they own?
He's saying both.
Both of them? Okay.
Yeah.
I had thought so, but yeah. Right, okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, it probably does need to be clarified then to be sure that it's one or both.
Yeah, I'll make a note of that before. I'll get an update on where they're really at in the process before we take it to
Yeah, because
council.
the others, the actual agreement is more general and is okay, because on page 3 it says shall own or purchase and covers all of them, so
Yeah.
that one is okay. Question I had, what is the affordability period on this?
Well, this actually might be something that's changing as well, thanks to HUD's visit last week.
Yeah.
They had a lot of feedback, but it's good. It's all manageable. We have always done, if you are doing a CHOTO activity, the home program allows you to incorporate, allows the CHOTO to incorporate down payment assistance as part of your development subsidy. So you set aside a portion to give as direct buyer assistance. And if that assistance is below $15,000, then it's a 5-year affordability period. And so traditionally, that is what we have done. HUD's came back and they told us, after looking through all of our files, that most other jurisdictions actually, because it's habitat and because they're already maintaining the units for the 10-year affordability period anyways, and beyond, you know, they manage the mortgages for these properties. They said that most jurisdictions will do resale. So the home program allows kind of 2 different ways of restricting the use of that property if you've given home funds to the buyer or invested any sort of home funds in the property itself. Recapture is when you're doing direct buyer assistance. Resale is a different set of provisions. It's a different way of calculating just how much subsidy you've put into the unit, and so it generally increases the number of years that you have to monitor that property for principal residency and, you know, maintenance, that kind of thing. And so HUD has recommended to us that we've been doing recapture. They're recommending now that we go to resale, mostly because the way we were doing our underwriting, they weren't on board with how we were justifying the amount of direct buyer assistance we were giving. It was basically a flat amount, and they want you to really justify based on the buyer's need and all these other things. But Habitat already kind of does that internally because they're the ones setting the mortgage amount. So they move the mortgage amount based on, you know, the buyer's income. And so, you know, how do we justify need when Habitat's trying to do the same thing? And so that's why most jurisdictions will just use the resale provisions so that you don't have to calculate anything as far as direct buyer assistance. You just look at your bottom line, which in this case for, you know, each property it would be $37,500. That is the amount of home funds that you've invested. So you calculate the number of years based on that dollar amount. So if your home investment is below $40,000, it's a 10-year affordability period. And so that is what HUD is telling us that we should move towards in our future habitat builds, and I would expect with this contract that is what we will be imposing. And so it'll be actually a land use restriction agreement as opposed to a mortgage. But this is new, and this all literally came down on Friday. And so we had already kind of prepared our packet, and I'll probably have to add the land use restriction agreement to, because we have a template as part of the attachments for our agreement. And so I'll have to add that land use restriction agreement and just put a provision in there that says based on, you know, whether the city of Urbana is imposing resale or recapture provisions, you know, this is the particular contract that will have to be recorded against the property.
Right. That's what I was wondering, because I know that things were changing with that, different places. And I guess, I'm assuming obviously you're going to go through this. There are always different time periods in these for things expire, you know, 5 years after such and such a date, and if that affordability period changes, some of those dates or time periods may need to be changed in this also, you know what I
Gotcha.
mean?
Yeah, no, that makes
Um,
sense.
I think the recapture is 5 years after, what is it? 5 years after the closing date of the project.
Yes.
So if that, I'm not sure if that,
Well,
the agreement is effective the date it's executed by the mayor and
do you have the
remains in the,
page?
yeah,
Sorry.
it's, I'm sorry, page 11
Thank you.
at the top.
Yeah.
I assumed you naturally knew what page it was. I'm not 100% sure that that needs to be changed, but I'm not entirely sure that it doesn't, right at the top, because of the 5-year time period on there. Or if
Well, and
that
actually
would
that's-
automatically change the closing date of the project to whenever that affordability period ended, you know, so.
Yeah, because it needs to be 5 years after the end, the termination of the affordability period.
Right, so that would.
So that's probably just.
Traditionally, that's been 10 years down the road, 5 and 5, and now
Yeah.
it would be.
Well, and I feel like some language got lost because usually there's another provision in here. There's only 2 and normally there's 3. So I'll
Okay.
have to look back.
Yeah,
Thank you for
no
catching
problem,
that.
just shifting time.
Can we hire you
periods
as our
always shift
internal
everything.
grants
Yeah,
attorney?
yeah.
That would be wonderful.
There you go. I don't think they allow you to say, we don't care because we're done with this. Probably not.
I was wondering, you mentioned resale. When would that occur? I mean, can you explain about the resale?
Yeah, so we haven't used resale in a long time. If ever. But my understanding of it is that if at any point within, say it's a 10-year affordability period, you do choose to sell the property, you don't pay money back necessarily, but what we'd be doing is restricting the sale to the next buyer. That person would have to be a low-income household. So that's why they call it resale, because we're dictating who, how, and when
Conditions.
you're going to sell, what that's going to look like. And so we've kind of avoided that, because how do you come up with a definition? It might work now in today's market, but is that definition going to make any sense with how you're defining a low-income household or the sales price? You have to dictate all these things that might make no sense 8 or 9 years down the road. And so that's why we've generally always tried to avoid it, because that definition can be a little sticky. So, but I expect that we would be consulting with other jurisdictions to see, what their provisions look like, because I know that sales price has to be accounted for, and then the actual income level, and you have to have a justification for it. And most of the time, the only time we've ever really used resale is for rental projects, and so it's a totally different context, and we've never really had to define those things. So, or if we have, it's been years since we've ever done it. It's, kind of before my time would be my guess. Do you have historical
I think
perspective?
they also throw in capital gains as a part of that. One of the things that you can't do is profit by selling it in that early period of time. So let's
Yes.
say there was a windfall increase in property values, bailing out of it early and taking a profit when you haven't gotten past that time period.
Fulfilled your
Yeah,
obligations.
so there's a calculation that falls in there too. So it is a pretty complex.
It is.
deal.
Well, and the same is actually true for recapture. We don't allow somebody to make money off of the
Right.
money we gave them. Even if it's like a shared proceeds, that's only
Right.
in the event that there isn't enough money
But
for us to
that's
collect
also
it back.
in that, so now you have a bunch of moving parts. It's a complex calculation, I think.
It is. So all that will have to be revisited. And so these projects, they will be, most of them, I believe, involve demolition. Thank you. I had a whirlwind of a week, and then there was a CDC memo. So the projects will all, begin within the next year, but the time for actually construction could be later than that. It just depends on when they have families that are ready in the application process, doing all the home buyer education, all of that. will kind of determine how quickly they're able to turn over those properties and start, you know, break ground and do the new construction side of the projects. So I know that the division will have some time to look at all those things before we'd even go to a sale. And hopefully we can shore up exactly what those provisions will be. But yeah, that's something I'm hopefully going to be able to get word back on from some other colleagues downstate, hopefully, that have been using some good agreements, good templates, language that we could borrow from that. So
Okay, thank you again. Any more questions or comments? Okay, with this agreement, we need to, I'll entertain a motion to either forward the resolution to the city council with a recommendation for approval, or we can forward it with a recommendation for approval with some changes, or we can not recommend it for approval. Chris, you mentioned a couple of changes that.
Yeah, I guess I would recommend we forward it to the city council with a recommendation for approval, subject to the detailed changes that we were talking about, or reviewing those timeframes, or whether it's owned or not.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to forward the resolution to Urbana City Council with a recommendation for approval with the suggested changes. And I might also mention that, because I always look at this, the fiscal impact, there'll be no change to the city's general fund as a result of this action. And also, the funds are already incorporated into the annual action plan and city budget. So I just wanted to note that. Would all in favor say aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed, no? Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Okay. Any other new business? We have none listed. Also, we have no study session.
Correct.
So next on our agenda is adjournment. Anything prior to adjournment? If not, meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for your attention.